I don't know Arthur C. Brooks. I have a question about, I question that quote a little bit because I tend to think happiness is a byproduct, not a destination, right? Happiness is not what we pursue. What we pursue brings happiness.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Functional Retirement Podcast, where wealth and health converge. I'm your host, Thatcher Taylor. I'm here with an extremely special guest. We want to dive deeper than just the nuts and bolts. We want to dive deeper into retirement. So I brought in the retirement answer man, Roger Whitney. Roger is a 3-time Plutus Award winner for Best Retirement Blog and Podcast, host of one of the top retirement podcasts in iTunes with more than 8 million downloads and over 475 episodes. I have been told by another advisor that's very successful named Taylor Schulte that he is the retirement podfather. He's the author of Rock Retirement, a simple guide to help you take control and be more optimistic about your future. I'll link that below. More than 25 years experience. I imagine more since this was written, is a financial planner. Investopedia's top 100 most influential advisors in 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. He's the best blog to follow in 2018 by Inc. magazine, and he's the creator of the Rock Retirement Club. I'm tired just saying it. Roger, welcome.
I'm tired of hearing it. Yeah. Welcome. Taylor's a wonderful guy. I'm going to see him in a week and a half.
Tell him I say hello.
I will. He's going to beat me in golf. No doubt.
We actually played golf. I reached out to him. Hey, I want to learn more. You're very successful in these certain areas, and your name came up. So this has been a long time coming that I've wanted to get you on here, and I really appreciate you giving my listeners some insight.
I'm excited to help however I can. So,
yeah, first place we got to start. You tweeted yesterday, your life should be your message. And I've been waiting to ask you, what do you mean by that?
well, it's not my saying because it's a very famous saying. It's attributed to Gandhi, but the first attribution was to Richard. I can't remember his last name, who is, I believe, a missionary or a religious figure in Japan in like 1898. It's been a little bit of a hobby of mine just recently to actually go try to find where the quotes come from, because it's so easy you think somebody else said it, but it's actually been said a lot of times before. I saw it and it reminded me of it. And then so I journaled on it. And your life is your message is much more, it's related to what is another quote, what you're doing so loudly is speaking so loudly that I can't hear what you're saying. And I think of when it comes to retirement planning, I have some very strong opinions about how it should be done. And I have strong opinions that most people are not, advisors and planners are not doing it to a standard that they should. And it's very easy just to go spout off about that. And my approach is I'd rather just go create what I think should be and let that stand as an example or a reflection and hopefully change. So it's not what you say, it's what you do is essentially what it means, right?
Yeah, I love it. And how did you come to that conclusion? So you've been in the industry a long time. What led you to that? Had you had some experiences with bigger firms early on? What got you to that point where you just kind of want to start creating what you thought needed to be there?
Yeah, when you get as old as I am, which is only 56, and so let's not exaggerate my age, but I started institutionalized. I started a small brokerage firm, traded technology stocks through the 90s, and then went on the path of getting my first certification, the certified financial planner. And I joined a large firm, Payne Weber at the time, which became UBS. And I thought that was growing up into how the real professionals do it, and quickly became disillusioned with the game that they play, which is essentially the whole industry is a model of asset accumulation. Bring more assets. How do I grow? And became very disillusioned with that and went and started a firm with 2 partners in 2003 and built our own firm. And along that journey, I started teaching the retirement planning segment of the CFP curriculum. So at University of Texas, Arlington, I was teaching CFP candidates the program, and it was still focused so much on retirement planning as it's taught is essentially a net present value calculation of all about the money and spreadsheets. And retirement is so much more than that, but we're so institutionalized, we don't even see it. And so it's just all these little aha moments for myself. And then it really started in terms of building what should be. Starting the podcast was when I started the Retirement Answer Man almost 10 years ago now. It was really for myself because I think out loud. So I just started to think about client problems and questions out loud via the show. It was for me, not so much to, business generation, et cetera. And that helped me define, well, what should be, and then how do you build structure and processes around that? There's a good quote from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, which is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so what kind of systems can you build to actually help people? Well, and our phrase is rock retirement, right? Live fully. But yeah, the industry is designed for scale, and scaled is not necessarily great retirement planning.
That's right. And you can tell with a lot of those big firms, it's an asset accumulation game because you don't know anything about their advisors. You don't have any specific relationship with them until you get some sort of advertising or marketing, maybe a referral that comes across your desk or your TV. And all of a sudden you feel the obligation to reach out to UBS or Fidelity or Edward Jones or whoever it may be, JP Morgan.
And I would argue even a lot of independent firms too, right? This isn't that these are bad people.
Right.
It's just that everything is about scaling a business, which is a reasonable thing to want to do.
Yep.
And most of the planning, the retirement planning in my case, is a few inches deep. And it becomes all about investment management. Investment management and is not retirement planning. And if you're trying to scale a business, you're not going to have enough capacity to do the real retirement planning. So it's not like, and I want to make sure I say, it's not about bad people. It's just sometimes there's unconscious incompetence, and sometimes there's conscious incompetence. Meaning I know that there's a lot more to do, but I'm either not allowed to do it or I just don't feel like doing it.
That's right. Yeah, their vision, their operation is just a little bit different. You mentioned something about systems, which is a perfect segue into the second tweet I want to talk about. You tweeted a note card that said pre-meeting protocol. One,
I got it right here.
There it is. 1, clean your desk and notepad. 2, open Asana, planner, other materials. 3, which is my favorite, do 10 push-ups, sit-ups, or burpees. 4, breathe. Repeat, I got this, let's go. And then 5, log in. So you have a pre-meeting, like a pre-game routine, and you just talked about systems. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, well, this is clean your desk. So cleaning your desk is physical, but it's also mentally cleaning your desk because I'm here with Thatcher right now, right? Right before I got on with Thatcher, I was doing a lot of other stuff, right? So cleaning my desk is preparing myself to simply be with Thatcher in this case. Open Asana, which is our project management software that we use with clients. Planner is the planning software, whatever materials I need to perform in the meeting. The push-ups and the sit-ups and the burpees, just one of those. It's just to get my blood flowing. Get my blood flowing. And then breathe, repeat who I'm going to be speaking with, and say, I've got this, let's go. Affirmation that I'm ready to go, and then log in. I mean, that is a good way of setting myself to be totally present, to be with and serve whoever I'm supposed to be serving.
A little added level of care, just a little extra focus to deliver a higher quality of result. I think that's really cool.
We all are. I mean, I'm not perfect at it. I have a note card because it's not internalized, right? But I tried to build these things for all sorts of things. And that little bit of intentionality allows me to be present and not wonder what I'm going to say because I have it all structured. That way I can actually be more creative with the person. Same reason we come in with agendas and very specific things of how we operate with a client throughout the year. That way I never have to wonder what I'm going to say. I can just simply be creative within the standard that we try to deliver, right? And I have a post-meeting protocol, which is similar, review the notes, dictate to the captain's log, which is essentially the compliance log, update our Asana project with tasks, close all the client tools, and then celebrate. Hey, that's like me. That was awesome. So happy for them. I'm happy that we did that. And then you can move on to the next one.
Both the beginning and the end are both areas that I could definitely improve on, especially and some just financial advisor stuff. Make sure to take good notes, do all the tasks that need to get done. It's very easy to stop something and transition to the next thing and miss all those finishing touches that you need to do. I'm right there with you on that one.
Yeah, we all could be improved, right? And that's the ultimate game of just how do I become, it's a game that will never end. How do I show up better for the business, for my family, for my kids, for my friends, for my clients, and so on?
Yep. And that's perfect. And you're doing a great job so far. So you're giving us a lot of really good attention right now. So we appreciate it. Really creative so far. So it's working. It's working. But I love how you look at retirement differently. Specifically, I listened to a Morningstar podcast, and the headline in there was retirement planning is not financial planning. You've already touched on this a little bit, but this is going to set us up for my next question, more personal question, but elaborate on that a little bit for us.
That was an interesting podcast. I showed up in a little bit different way. I thought I felt good about that one in sense of, that was the first time I used something that I remind myself a lot of, Thatcher, which is I asked, what do they want to hear? And then I asked, what do they need to hear? And I chose the latter of what do they need to hear? What do I need to bring? Not trying to please them, but just say what I actually believe. And that was the first time I really framed it that way. And I try to always go in with what do people need to hear, with love, of course. Retirement planning and financial planning are not the same thing. They just aren't. And having a certified financial planner designation is wonderful. It's a great survey of the entire world, but retirement planning is a subspecialty, much like surgery or dermatology is a subspecialty of being a doctor. Decumulation is very different, and not everybody can or should do it unless they're trained and are very thoughtful about decumulation. The way most retirement planning happens, in my observations, is that we plug in sending money out into an accumulation. Financial planning is about how do I build wealth. Retirement planning is how do I use that wealth to harvest that wealth to create a great life. And that takes a lot different skill sets than what a normal financial planning does. And I don't think anybody appreciates that, and nobody makes the distinction.
Agreed.
Here's a perfect example from that podcast, by the way, where I can't recall the name of the co-host. I know Christine personally, so I know her name, but the gentleman, we were talking, I was talking about something not related to money. And he said some comment of, oh, that softer side of retirement. And then he started to move on to ask me about numbers again. And I stopped him. I said, wait a second. No, that's not the softer side. That is the whole point of the exercise, using your money to create a life that you can look back without, with minimal regret. And I think now he's a wonderful guy, but that attitude of we'll acknowledge that it's about memories and we'll put that on the brochure and experiences, et cetera. But let's get back to the spreadsheet is sort of how we treat that. It's sort of, yeah, we acknowledge that. Now let's get back to our geeky stuff. And it misses the whole point. And it sort of annoyed me, and not in a mean way, but I was like, wait a second, no, that's not, this is the point. And that interaction for me was a demonstration of most people, financial planners, don't get it.
That's right. And especially since it's Morningstar. Morningstar is an investment-based organization, how to evaluate your investments, mutual funds, ETF, stocks, performance, volatility, all that nonsense. And so his perspective was coming from there when
but
we
it's
know
in a box.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. They do great work, but it's within a certain domain that necessarily can't be applied everywhere.
That's right. I think that there was an experience that you had early in your life that kind of led to this mentality, because I believe the same thing. I grew up in the investment world, Thriving Financial, Edward Jones. There was some insurance in there. Then I was at Vanguard for 5 years in the ultra high net worth department. We're just talking about assets the whole time. It's just how much money, where should it be invested? It wasn't until I actually read Nick Murray that brought a different perspective where he said goals first, plans second, assets third. That the assets are the last piece of the puzzle, and they're only there to support the vision and the goals in the future. Now, you mentioned on your website, you tell a story about your mom and her wealth building journey that I think might have helped kind of really nail down your thoughts and beliefs now. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Nick Murray, man, that's OG right there, especially for someone of your generation, of your
He's the
vintage
man.
of human. He's the, yeah. And I share this in my book of, and it's interesting how you frame things. So I'm going to say I frame this now in a certain way, and there's a lot more nuance to it. So I grew up with a mom and two sisters, single parent in the 70s. She eventually got remarried in the 80s. But she had a lot of pressure. You can imagine being a single mother in the 70s with 3 kids trying to provide. She had a lot of pressure to be, bring home the bacon fried up in a pan and take care of the kids. And so she had a lot of focus on, and the way I remember her framing it is, I will be able to enjoy my life when I retire. And I remember in college, she would come up and visit me, and we would have dinners, and we would have like debates. I was a debater in high school, so I loved the debate, and I thought I knew everything when I was a teenager. And we would have these discussions around living well today and sacrificing for tomorrow. And she had a lot of reasons to sacrifice for tomorrow. As a younger dude, I was like, well, you got to live today. Tomorrow may never come, etc. And as an example of how hard she worked, she was working full time. I was still in school, and I think my sisters were still in school, and she was going to law school on the side. She graduated law school, I believe, in the mid 80s when she was 40. And what in her journey, right as I was graduating college, she had ovarian cancer once. It went away, or it was in remission, and then came back. And I actually moved from Michigan to Texas to do an internship, and had to fly back because it had come back at a vengeance, and she decided that she wasn't going to pursue all the chemo and everything else. And so she died at 48. Right. And that framed it in my period of life of, yes, tomorrow is really, really important. We have to be good stewards, but not at the sacrifice of having a great life today. And the way I think of that, Thatcher, is that we're all standing on a teeter-totter in retirement, right? One is we know this memento mori concept of we may die at any moment. We want to have a great life today, but we don't want to be destitute when we're 80 or 90 or what have you. And there's a natural tension between those two things. And we're balancing on the middle of those things. And what I observed with traditional financial planning is that, one, we're living longer than any other generation in history. 2, most of us don't have pensions, or a lot less pensions than previous generations. So it's required on our wealth. And not only are we living longer, but we are much more active. Like my grandfather, when he retired, he retired to the park bench. He was a postman. He had really hard physical work. He moved to Florida and he read. He had a very park bench kind of retirement. Modern retirees are in the playground. That's when they're traveling, they're loving on their kids, they're doing activities, etc. You combine all of those things into a model of classical retirement planning, the numbers typically don't work. And so the way retirement planning from a traditional sense is set up, we're basically giving people a lot of really crappy choices. Well, no. You better save more, which sacrifices your life right now. Or you better work longer. Or you better take more investment risk because we got to get this money to grow to make the numbers work. Or you better be satisfied with less later on, or some version of a number of those choices. Well, those all suck. So no wonder nobody wants to do retirement planning. There's a lot more nuance to it than those spreadsheets. And And so that's my role in life, is to help figure out, how do you actually do this?
And when did that click? So obviously that happened. Your mother passed away pretty early at 48. And so you were still pretty young. You were just getting out of college, probably starting your career in the industry. You said you're 56 now. At what point did it really click? Did it take a few years or maybe a decade, a little maturity for you to finally be like, oh, geez, my mom just left me the keys to my whole mission, my whole
Oh,
castle?
heck no. No, in my 20s, I was an idiot. I was all YOLO, right? I made a little bit too much money than I should have. And I've been married 33 years. Shauna, my wife, is downstairs somewhere. And thought I was all that, built the big house, bought the nice BMW. She hates BMWs to this day because it represents who I was.
Yeah.
No, I was an idiot. It was really in my 40s when I actually started to be intentional and pay attention rather than just let life happen and ride with the flow. So it was really in my 40s.
Right.
So
That's
I
what
guess
I
I had to
thought.
marinate a long time.
Yeah. And so what do you think? I call someone like, I have kind of a jock mentality, played a lot of sports growing up, played a little sports in college. So there's some terms that I like to use just in general conversation, but I would consider your mom a grinder. I would consider the other individual that you mentioned, who was it, with the park bench retirement? Who was that you said?
That was my grandfather, her
So,
father.
so your grandfather was a grinder. There are these grinders. And yeah, the mindset is now shifting to more of a playground type retirement. How do you switch somewhat of a grinder that saves everything, that doesn't live as much in the now? They're on one side of the teeter totter. How do you help them, or what have you seen helps move people over to finding that balance, being able to stabilize the teeter totter?
There are two retirement crises, whatever the word is,
Yeah.
in America. There's the one that's the real crisis, which is the majority of people will not have enough money, and they're going to have to live on Social Security plus whatever resources they have and social capital or family help. That's the real crisis, right? There's another crisis that I observed in my journey, in my practice, and in the Rock Retirement Club, and with the people I communicate with via the Retirement Answer Man show, which is not near as elegant or as critical as that one that we just talked about, the real crisis. And this crisis is for those grinders, the people that did a lot of the right things and then also had a lot of good fortune, because we got to throw luck in there. They didn't have major medical, or they had a social network. There's a lot of that part of it in there as well. And now they're at retirement, and now they're just supposed to spend. And these people have they have the most opportunity to spend because they've done all of this work and had some good fortune. And their crisis is they have no confidence in spending. So it's a crisis of confidence, which doesn't sound near as critical as the other one. And so what I've observed, Thatcher, that ends up happening is there's so much to worry about, and there's so much uncertainty in the world and in how, retirement's going to work, et cetera, that grinders will just keep denying themselves because they can't see that they could do things. Mm-hmm. And eventually what will happen, most likely, and I've seen this happen, is they'll start to get to their 70s or 80s, and a switch will flip where, I'm going to be all right. I'm probably going to die with more money than I expected. And then they start looking backward. What the hell did I work so long for? Excuse me. Why didn't I, do those trips? Why didn't I give to that charity? And then you start to build regret. And now they're finding themselves later in life not able to do the things they wish they would have done. So how do you get out of that is your question. So sorry. Now I'll get to your question.
It. That was awesome. I love, and yeah, I mean, how do you get it? It's literally almost changing behaviors. Like, how do you change?
It is. You are your identity, and your identity is, if you do the etymology of identity, it's repeated beingness, right? And repeated beingness for those at retirement is being that grinder mentality that you characterize, right? You don't just not be a grinder. So it's a journey, right? And the journey is So it doesn't happen. You don't just have a meeting and get the education and all of a sudden, bam, you figured it out. No, it's a journey of redefining your identity. James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is a great one because, as Nietzsche said, you have to, a snake that doesn't shed its skin dies. And so retirement in this visual is you having to shed some of your identity to become this new identity, which does not happen overnight. And part of part of shedding that skin is having confidence that you can do things, right? And if you think of hope, the definition of hope is you need to have three things. You need to have a vision for things that you would like to do, right? I want to create memories with my children. I want to have this impact on my community, etc. I want to travel. And then you have to identify your agency. What can I do? Do I have agency to be able to make those things happen? And then lastly, you need to have pathways of, okay, how do I apply this agency to get those things? And for us, it's building a retirement plan of record, not so much that you fix it all, but you have context to say, if I go spend this money this year, will I still be okay later on? Right. So you have to have some context. And we use a retirement plan of record that's structured to help people see past the horizon a little bit when they're making decisions.
Maybe it's time, which this comes from the Vanguard mentality that I was just with for 4.5 years in the ultra high net worth department, where none of those people had financial advisors. They were all do-it-yourselfers with millions of dollars in assets and Vanguard assets, just kind of sitting there and growing and plugging away with that grinder, low-cost mentality, where maybe they were in that situation where they didn't have the confidence. They were too afraid to start spending a little bit more and enjoying it a little bit more. Maybe a little financial advisor meeting could have just bumped them in the right direction or gave them that confidence.
Yeah. And it's not going to be one meeting or one interaction. It's because it's a process, right? Mm-hmm. But most of us are, well, we're not trained in that. We're trained in spreadsheets. And I don't think I have one right here. I have a sticker that says 3 times, retirement is not a spreadsheet. And that's one of my mantras. If you think of sowing versus reaping, the grinder is a really good sower, building wealth and getting the affirmation and the confirmation in seeing their wealth grow and getting the accolades at work and everything else, right? So that's like the guy or gal that goes to the gym and they always do upper body. Mm-hmm. And they're super developed and they're comfortable there. Mm-hmm. Well, when you get to retirement, you're in the reaping stage. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be using this wealth to create a life that represents what you want. I mean, hopefully you're doing it throughout your life. That's your legs. Well, if you have a very overdeveloped grinder upper body and growth, those people don't want to do leg day, right? Because that's not their comfortable spot because it's so underdeveloped. They don't know how to do it. And physically, I guess that's an example of what we're talking about here.
Yep.
The sweet spot is you're balancing all of this. You're having a great life today and still have confidence about tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that balance term. And one way that I like to look at it is buying more happiness. So the money is not just the money, like how much wealth we can accumulate. Arthur C. Brooks says that there are 3 ways to buy more happiness. There's experiences, buy more actual experiences, buy more time, and then give back more. So I think people are still stuck in that mentality when they get towards retirement. Like, I don't want to touch the principal. I just want to keep accumulating more and more. I don't want to spend it. I don't know how to spend it. Maybe they're just not thinking about what they're using their money for. Do you feel like there's some validity about reframing how to use the money that's going to provide more happiness as opposed to restrict you?
I don't know Arthur C. Brooks. I have a question I question that quote a little bit because I tend to think happiness is a byproduct, not a destination. Right? Happiness is not what we pursue. What we pursue brings happiness. Right. And so when you get to retirement, and I think this is the central part of your question, you correct me if I'm wrong, Thatcher, is that sometimes we lack imagination. I don't know. I'm happy right now. Most people, most people that live, it's money doesn't equate happiness, or buying things doesn't equate happiness. They're like, I don't need much. I'm happy with how life is. And that's wonderful. That's actually the sweet spot. That solves, money does not. I saw an article how inflation is robbing happiness. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about the inflation of concert tickets and things like that. And I'm like, wait a second, the whole premise is wrong. You don't need money to be happy. It doesn't hurt. Right. Once I buy my bicycle, I have happiness for years because I can go explore. It's a journey to figure out what do I want in my life and what don't I want in my life. And that's not going to be brainstorming in a session and thinking about the next 20 years of your retirement. It's going to be, there may be a little bit of that, but it's really going to be, what do I want to do next year? What's important to me next year? What do I want more of in my life next year? I need to be closer to those remote grandchildren. I haven't seen them in a while. The next question is, well, how can I be closer to them and have more face time with them? Well, I could go stay there for a month. I could bring them here for a month. I could, rent a house in Cape Cod and bring everybody there. Then you can start to explore how to get what you want, which is essentially more face time with your grandchildren to deepen the relationship. So you can think of these long-term, but I think doing it year by year is much more helpful because that's real to us. It's actionable.
Yeah, that's great. And sorry, I did leave you in the dark. Arthur C. Brooks, he's a Harvard professor. He studies happiness, well-renowned author, just came out with a book. I
probably should know that. I probably have one of his books that I haven't read yet because
you got a whole library back there. But anyway, he says basically that where there's a point where making an additional dollar or making more money doesn't actually promote any more happiness or increase unhappiness, because he'll segment them both out, that happiness and unhappiness are two separate things. So he says there's a point where you make more money and it doesn't produce any more happiness or reduce unhappiness. And it basically is at that point buying more experiences with grandkids or buying more time, as opposed to, I don't want to mow the lawn anymore. Well, pay someone to do it, or give back to operations that you think are important, that meet your vision, your goals, things that are important to you. And that's kind of along the lines of what you just said. So maybe you should go teach that Harvard class.
I was looking for, and what makes you happy or what things you want to pursue. It assumes you know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we don't need to get too touchy-feely here. And sometimes this stuff can get too touchy-feely. And I was looking for it because I have a plaque with my top 10 values, which I should know off the top of my head, but I'm 56, I guess. But one of them, for me, as an example, is adventure. I know that if I don't have adventure in my life, I'm not fully who I am. Right. So if you can define your top 10 values, and you don't have to get too analytical about this, I just, I'm a agile kind of guy, so I just pick them and they actually have stuck. But I know I'm not fully myself if I don't have adventure in my life. So that means I have to make sure that adventure is happening. I'm going to, I'm doing a rucking adventure in Costa Rica in January. That's going to be part of my adventure for next year, as an example.
And that's a perfect example. I think that's along the lines of what we're saying, where that's an example of you're finding a purpose for you being a little bit of a grinder now, maybe not completely a grinder, but being a little bit of a grinder so you can continue to find adventure later, as opposed to what you said was one of the biggest crises where you're restricted and you no longer have that adventure later in life, which may promote more unhappiness in retirement. So you're now adding, there's a reason we're investing or making these sacrifices now for a purpose later in life.
But I think one thing with people that are grinders or very overdeveloped on the accumulator side is that we think of retirement like we see the brochures, right? There's some lazy dude or gal sitting on the park bench or on the lawn chair, and that's cool. But if I go to a resort, I don't want to sit down and just sit there at the pool all day. Happy people have projects. Mm-hmm. And retirement, if means retired from useful service, put away, put on the shelf, thrown out. I'm not a big believer in traditional retirement, right? I have no plans to retire, but I do have plans to continue to have time freedom while I'm still working, so I can have the best of both worlds. But the most engaged, happy people I know that are ahead of maybe some of the people that are hanging out with us, they're the busiest people I know.
Mm-hmm. How often do you hear, in your experience, how often have you heard, I just want to retire and do nothing? Like, I just want to retire and sit down. How often do you hear that?
I do hear that more than you may think. And typically I did a Spartan Beast last weekend, right? And I purposely went in undertrained. But the reason I bring this up is there are periods of time I'm like, I just can't wait until this thing's over and I can go sit on the couch, right? Because it was a hot day, it was rocky, I was in pain. I wanted to retire to the couch. And I was saying that at times. I think usually when we say, yeah, I just want to go, I just need to sit. I just need that, quote unquote, traditional retirement. Usually that's because we're running away from the pain of the too many meetings, the too much travel, the too much, the interpersonal dynamics of whatever work you're doing, right? We're running away from something. So yeah, you want the pain to go away. Like I wanted the pain to go away in the race. Mm-hmm. Once they get there, generally after a period of time of rest, then they're ready, they're recharged to go pursue something. And for some people that's baking, for some people that's health, for some people that's grandchildren. So I think the people that say that generally they're trying to take the pain away and they haven't really developed what they're running towards, which is maybe either one works, but that probably is more healthier, where you're so excited about what you're going towards that work is just getting in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a quote here by a great person that said, there are no more random acts of retirement. Do you know who said that?
There are no more random acts of retirement. Well, we, as a process, what I think should be,
there we go,
is intentionality. Right? You're going to make a lot of really bad decisions, right? But the key we use an agile approach. So, my premise is that, hey, how should retirement planning actually be done? I think all planning should be done actually, is not the deterministic way that it's done now, where we overthink everything for the rest of our lives and create these big bloated things that aren't really that meaningless. And then we check in, every year or so. What we have done is taken agile project management, which comes from the software development world, which is an iterative approach. You figure out what are you trying to accomplish? What's the most important thing? You ship a minimal viable product with the key thing you're trying to do, knowing that it will be imperfect. And then you iterate by paying attention and taking intentional action in very incremental ways. And it takes all the pressure of trying to figure things out. So to put a point on that, the old traditional way of doing retirement planning, mainly, partly because we want to be comprehensive, is to build this huge package. And I would equate that to, and if you're old enough, you'll remember when you buy Microsoft Office, the new version, and you'd get like 20 CD-ROMs, and you would sit there the entire night loading these CD-ROMs because it's this big bloated piece of software with that dancing paperclip, whatever his name was, Clippy, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then it's buggy, and then they can't fix it easily because it's this big bloated project. That is, to me, traditional retirement planning or financial planning. Mm-hmm. Modern retirement planning is like the apps on your iPhone or your Android or whatever you use. Is, hey, an app, when it first comes out, you buy it because it's going to do some fancy thing for you. And you realize usually early on that they're coming out with updates, sometimes daily, sometimes, weekly, because they're hearing what's not working or where the direction it needs to go. And they can quickly ship updates based on reality. That's what an agile project is. And so that's what we do in retirement planning, because so much of this is unfigure-outable.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to act, whether it's the investment people or the planning people, like you can actually figure it out, and you cannot. So it's a waste of time, all the strategists, all the researchers trying to say we can figure out where the markets are going to go, what the right withdrawal rate is.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, it's trying to figure out something that you can't figure out. So it sounds like a big waste of time to me.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I wanted to go with it. That quote on your website was right next to your Agile retirement management. And that's kind of what I want you to dive into, where we start to get into more detail and specificity on what happens throughout this retirement journey after you kind of set the vision, the goals, the purpose, kind of what's important to you. Now we start to get more opportunistic about how that all works. And there's a specific process, because you're right. We don't know how long people are going to live. We have an idea, but we don't know. Retirement could be a long time. It could be a short time. It's kind of a big gamble where maybe you pass away early and you leave a lot, or you pass away later and you don't have enough longevity risk. So, I mean, your retirement methodology, I think, is really valuable, that clients can really take with them to start to implement and answer some of those questions. More specifically, when you're working through a retirement plan with an individual, what are some things that you're actually getting down on paper at the end of the delivery or the few meetings? Like, what are some of the actual deliverables that you like to send with people, or when people work with you, that you think are really valuable?
So these are the pillars of rocking retirement. Okay. There are 4 pillars in the financial domain, 4 pillars in the non-financial domain. So when we are working with a client, the first step is to set up the project of that client's retirement. So we think of ourselves as project managers.
Mm-hmm.
So step 1 is, what do I want? Which is a question that will never go away. It's a much harder question than you think it would be. And that's creating vision 1. The vision, which is the first pillar, is what do I want in my life? And how do I equate that to goals? I want to have memories with my grandchildren. Okay, well, how do we create goals out of that to be able to make that so? And we think of vision in 3 categories. What the first is the base great life. So we define how much does it cost to live the base great life for Thatcher. Mm-hmm. That's the marginal line in France, but unlike the French, we never want it crossed. We want to have the base great life of, what do I need? Just, absent discretionary things. And then what discretionary or wants do I want to have in my life? And what aspirational things, wishes, if I could have them? So once we get that in place, we have a vision of, okay, what our values are, what our vision is, experiential wise, and then we make goals out of them. Once we do that, we go to the next pillar, which is having a feasible plan of record, which is pillar 2, which is, okay, now I have my life and it's represented by these goals. I need to organize my current resources to see whether it's feasible for me to get those goals, right? And you have 3 sources of capital to fund your vision. You have social capital, which is going to be Social Security, pensions, et cetera, annuity income. You have human capital, part-time work, royalties, things like that. And then you have your financial capital, which is your money, your investment accounts. That's generally what we think of. And so we organize all of those things and do a feasibility study of, is it feasible to get these goals? And I'm actually happy in the first iteration if it fails miserably, because that means that we dreamt so big that we don't have the resources to get it, but at least we got all those dreams on paper. And then what you do in the feasibility pillar to get to a feasible plan of record is you have to negotiate with yourself. You have to prioritize. Okay, I can't have everything, duh. What's most important to me? And then you build a feasible plan of record that focuses on what's most important to you. So that's pillar 2. And so these are the deliverables along the way.
Mm-hmm.
The third pillar, and this is where even, in my experience anyway, a lot of planners fall down because you can't do this as easily in software, is how do I make a resilient plan of record? Okay. Thatcher says he wants to sail from California to Hawaii. That's his vision. Mm-hmm. He bought the boat. He's got enough gear. He's got some training, so it's feasible, right? In theory. But if being feasible isn't enough, because what happens if a storm comes on? What happens if a sail breaks or I don't know, something breaks? What can Thatcher do to make this trip resilient so he doesn't sink or get thrown off course too easily? Right. Mm-hmm. And that is in retirement, you got to do the same thing. I got to test against sequence of return, losing a spouse, etc. I got to figure out, how am I going to pay myself in a secure way? So if we have a bear market right after I retire, that I don't, we're not having uncomfortable conversations. And this is where things usually fall down. The last pillar for the financial domain is the pillar that everybody wants to focus on. And it's the last for a reason, which is optimization. Now that I have a vision of where I want to go, and I know it's feasible, and I've made it as resilient as I can by managing risks, how do I enhance this journey? Maybe this is Thatcher putting some, I don't know, your drink of choice or your snack of choice. How do you make this a more interesting journey? And a lot of this from a financial perspective is going to be tax planning, et cetera. So those are the pillars that we go through in that order. And that gets us to a retirement plan of record. And then as soon as this retirement plan of record is in place, life changes. Markets will change, interest rates will change. But what will change just as much, if not more, is what I want will change. Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to be much more agile. So then we go, once we have that project set up, then it's a systematic way of how do I refresh all of this and keep poking for risks and opportunities to enhance the plan and make sure it's going the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you do all that, the plan of record, do you build it yourself, or do you use some specific software?
In my practice and in the Rock Retirement Club, we do vision as some worksheets and mind mapping. Mm-hmm. Feasibility, we use Money Guide Pro to do long-term feasibility testing. And then making it resilient is spreadsheet. And in the club, we have a master class that teaches all of this, but and it's the same thing I use in my practice. And then we build out the resiliency. We do some resiliency testing in Money Guide Pro, but then we go to spreadsheets to build out exactly what do we do with the money so we have visibility of how we're paying for life.
Yeah, that's great. And we're going to talk about the Rock Retirement Club. I'm not going to let that just go away, but I think that's just a really cool framework that you present that in. It, again, similar to the old Nick Murray goals, plan, assets, but I think you've made it more specific, more detailed, and more conceptual to encompass the entire retirement journey and vision and how it's more systematic. It's just a little bit better system that I think can be delivered to clients. And I'm assuming with the success of the Rock Retirement Club in your business, clients really like this. And 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 years down the road, it still holds true. Like probably the initial plan and the adjustments along the way, they probably work out pretty well, right?
I have no clue because we change them so much.
Okay.
Right. The plan of record is, the plan of record, the way we manage that and we would advise is, the plan of record is a point in time, right? Like a compass reading. This is what I want. I know it's feasible. I see how I'm going to pay for it. And these are the things I can do to enhance it, right? We stamp that once a year. So if you think of like a map and a journey, we stamp it once a year as like stamping a waypoint, putting a marker on a map. Throughout the year, things are going to change, obviously asset-wise, but what people want. Oh, I'm getting married. My spouse died. I decided I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And those will be sort of the meandering in between, and we'll be updating the plan of record along the way. But then a year from now, we'll stamp it again. And it could be a completely different plan because they're a completely different person. So we'll have that crumb trail of every year, how it's meandering based on where they want to go. And that's one of those things that we don't even think about with retirement planning is we're doing all this planning thinking that we can actually figure any of this stuff out. When in reality, we're going to change our mind a zillion times about what we want because of life happening to us, but also because of change of priorities. So it's never a plan that you can go back and say, oh, wow, that plan that never changed worked out 20 years later. It just doesn't work that way.
Do you find some people though where it never changes? Like every year is just kind of the same thing, pretty
Nope.
consistent. Really interesting.
No. I mean, some more than others, but generally there's going to be change. Let's take inflation as an example, because I had a number of discussions about this. We've had high inflation recently, right?
Mm.
And
Transitory inflation, it was supposed to be transitory.
Yeah, it was transitory. And the questions were, should we change our inflation assumption? Right. Most people would argue we use a very low inflation assumption. I think it's like 2.63. Yeah. It's essentially the average since 1970. Yeah. And I've had some discussions on the podcast questions for sure. And well, inflation's like 6%. Should we change that assumption? And I always say, no, you can't change the assumptions, or very rarely, because it's a long-term forecast. And this is where software falls down. All software does is give you a long-term feasibility assessment.
Right.
But the way you manage inflation, if you're never going to change your assumption, or rarely, is every year you're updating all of your spending and your personal inflation rate. If we thought you were going to spend 90 and you spent 97, well, then we're going to use your actual spending to inform what all of our future assumptions are on your spending. So inflation will get picked up that way. I think that's a healthier way of doing it than changing your assumptions. When you have a process, if you change your assumptions, you almost don't have a process at all.
Right. That's
We're
interesting.
Geeking out here.
Yeah, I mean, inflation historically, I do the same thing. I'm kind of in that high 2% range because historically that's what it is. Tell me about the Rock Retirement Club. And here's why I'm asking this question. A lot of the listeners, they're do-it-yourselfers. They're on the path to try to figure this all out themselves. Is that what the Rock Retirement Club is catered to? How does it work and what is it?
So the Rock Retirement Club came from the podcast, and I had no intention of doing it. It just sort of came about speaking with the audience over years. And so we have Agile retirement management. Our practice is capacity constrained because we're not trying to scale in a significant way and serve more and more and more.
Yep.
Which is wonderful, but it's also annoying when you say no. And so what we built the Rock Retirement Club for is, in my opinion, one, there's no safe place to get real retirement planning education. In my opinion, almost all podcasts and videos and the entire internet is simply some huge sales funnel to get you to go do something, right? It's a big sales machine.
Yep.
Doesn't mean there's not a lot of great information out there. There are a lot of very generous content producers, such as yourself and others, but they all have an end in some way. And so there's no place to actually feel comfortable that I'm going to get education that's not influenced by trying to get us to do something. So we created the Rock Retirement Club and the Retirement Masterclass, which is the foundation of it, which is, I think it's like 12 modules teaching you step by step how to build a retirement plan of record. And it's built in an agile way. So it's not me droning on. It's take an action, sprint, take an action, take action, and to build the retirement plan of record going through those. And I give you the exact same tools I'm using. So they get access to Money Guide Pro, they get access to the spreadsheets that I'm using. So they can build a retirement plan of record. And then around that is a community of actual practitioners, myself, Andy Panko, Tanya Nichols, practicing retirement planners, to have group discussions on improving the plan and how do I do this, all those questions that come up. And then I have a cadre of amazing retirement coaches where we have meetups every single week. We just had a conference of 200 plus people.
I saw
within
that.
Within the Rock Retirement Club, there's no upsells of anything. None of us are marketing our businesses. If you're in the club, you get everything. And it's just 1,000 plus amazing people. About 30% of them have advisors. They just are interested and want to be better clients and participate more.
That's interesting that you just said a lot of them have existing advisors. Do you see a lot of them bringing, well, my advisor said this and my advisor said that, or the flip side, them taking what you say back to their advisors to implement?
Both. And I think it's wonderful because in my opinion, in my experience, clients don't hold their advisors to a high enough standard. And if you're paying money, it doesn't matter how much money it is. I mean, we're not inexpensive in our practice, but there better be enough value to justify what you're paying. You know, my internal mentality is I always have to dance for my dinner. I got to make sure. And so it makes better clients, and they're bringing up topics and ways of thinking about things to advisors that sometimes the advisors aren't bringing up or just haven't got to yet. So right now, I think consumers I'm either on my own in the wild west of the internet, patching together, and I don't get access to world-class software, or I have to go to an advisor. Right. And there's a lot of in between, and this is trying to be that safe place in between where it can empower you so you don't have to do it all by yourself.
I love it. And at what point in your career did you feel, you said you this kind of developed over time from the podcast, but was there a point in your career where you felt, we've talked about this already a little bit, but where you felt that what clients were getting from the traditional firms was inadequate from an education perspective, and you felt like you need to start writing books, making podcasts, developing clubs, doing all these things to give back and help educate investors and retirees? Was there a point, a critical point, a period of time? It could even be an age where you decided, I need to do a better job of this.
No, this entire thing is a personal journey for myself. This is all me sharpening the saw. That's why I started the podcast, and it's just morphed it. I just have leaned into what I feel I was put here to do, and everything is a byproduct of that. It's totally blown up my life since I started the journey and enriched my life in many ways. So in a lot of ways, it's selfish. I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I will argue, though, Thatcher, that education is easy. You can get all the world-class education you want. Everybody's going to tell you what you should think about every which way from Sunday of how to think about it. What no one is actually doing is helping you, showing you exactly how to do it. So it's what to think about, everything to think about it. The education part's done. It's not, okay, well, how do I actually do that? In what order do I do that? And that's the part that I think where the big gap is.
That's right. I agree. You could watch YouTube all day, but actually doing it is a completely different, the implementation of it all and how to implement is a completely different ballgame for sure.
For retirement, it's like I had to clean our pool filter the other day. It was way overdue and it was really gross. And this is the first time we had cleaned this one. I want for retirement what I had when I was putting back in the filters into the little slots. I want to be able to watch step by step exactly where they would go. That's, I think, what we try to create for retirement is, we can, I don't care about you being the world-class expert on it. Nobody wants to be an expert on retirement. If you're walking your life, you just want to live your life. So you don't need to be an expert. You just need enough knowledge to watch out for, waste of time and nefarious actors. You want to know, how do I actually do this? How do I put those filters back into place?
That's right. I had a similar experience just recently. I'm still working on it. My garage was unfinished. And I'm a big fitness person. I have a lot of gym equipment, a lot of it that goes in my garage. In the garage, the drywall, the tape was coming apart. It needed to be painted and cleaned. And you have the idea of how it's supposed to go. You got to get the drywall mud. You got to put it in the seams. You got to add the tape. You got to mud some more. You got to smooth it out. You got to sand it down. And then you got to prime it and you got to paint it. And there are all these things that you need to do. But where I was getting stuck, because I haven't done that stuff a lot in my life, is, well, what tools am I going to need? What if I don't have this tool? I mean, I could figure it out, but what if something goes wrong? What are these different elements that come into play? So I had to recruit my old man. I had to bring him down from Montana because he has a lot of experience in that area, just for someone there to kind of guide us through the process. And I think that's kind of what the Rock Retirement Club is. Just someone there to help guide you through the process.
Exactly. And it definitely hits the financial domain hard, but we spend equal amount of time on the non-financial domain.
That's right. Which, it's a great transition, but I just want to make this statement. If anybody's listening, I talked earlier about buying more happiness. I talked about being able to spend money on things that free up time. I am telling you, I'm making this statement. I will never do a substantial house project myself ever again. I am paying someone. I'm helping the economy. It was just pure unhappiness. It took me away from my family. It was just a headache, messy. I'm still working on it. It's a project. So I just want to make that statement clear. More personal, I always like to end these podcasts with two things. We'll get to the second thing here in a second, but talking about health. We haven't really dove into it a lot, but personally, tell me a little bit about how exercise oriented you are. And then tell me whether or not your club, the Rock Retirement Club, goes past finance into the fitness space and how important your body is, because you don't get a replacement. You only get one of them. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, my joke is, if you're unhealthy, you'll likely live just as long. It's just going to suck. That's my joke.
Peter Attia calls that your health span. That's your health
yes,
span.
he does.
Quality
That was
of
a very, yeah, I have the book over there. It's the most tagged book that I've read in ages, and I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I don't know how health oriented I am. I'm very health oriented, I think. I'm very focused on having energy, having the mindset. I've done lots of things in my life, Ironman and adventure racing and karate and all sorts of things. So I guess you would say I'm very exercise oriented. I'm big into rucking right now. From Peter's book, I'm 56 and I compete against myself. I'm not really a competitor against, trying to be on the podium. He's helping me redefine what my mission is with health and exercise around compounding the right things. So I'm still able to get on my mountain bike, which is my main passion, and do things when I'm, 66 and 76, etc. So I'm much more focused on not how much can I lift and how hard can I kill myself, although I get addicted to that. Ex-CrossFitter, absent 4 knee surgeries. More focused on being that holistic athlete. So because I want to make sure I can extend my lifespan, health span.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And in the club, we added, it was on the podcast this year, and in the club we added the 4 non-financial pillars, which nobody asked for, but I felt was needed, which are energy, your ability to show up with energy, your mindset, growth versus scarcity, your passion, which replaces work, and your relationships. And we actually, on the health end of it, we have a very accomplished physician, retired, who does this as a passion, where he's on the show once a month. And he's in the club doing meetups on exercise, on caffeine, on all sorts of things, alcohol, and from a very scientific standpoint, because the hard part with that is there's so much foo-foo stuff around health and nutrition and all that other stuff. So he's a clinician in the sense that he thinks logically, much like Peter Attia does.
Yeah, that's a really, really valuable tool. Peter Attia has the great chart where it's the X and Y axis. And I'll share this chart in the show notes below so people can take a look at it, where there's the first way that most people live, where there's a slow, steady decline until
the dismal decade. And we've seen people that have lived that way.
That's right. It's just a slow, steady decline. But the people that are a little more active and take care of their health from a longevity perspective, the next line is flatter for longer until there's basically a very steep drop off at the end. So there's a different way to approach the remaining years of your life. The fitness and exercise and taking care of yourself now, there's a variety of things, is so valuable to retirement that it's more than just money.
Yeah, what I appreciate about Dr. Attia is that he's humble enough to talk about the things he just doesn't know.
That's right.
And that's a rare skill.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we always end my guests, I ask. We just talked for over an hour. I want to leave here with 5 things, and they can be anything. I give you the freedom to name 5 things that people need to take with them that you think are the most valuable elements to help promote growth in this life. They can be anything you use in your life, but give me 5 things.
Number one's the most important. It's a quote from Phil Stutz, is truly accept that you will never be exonerated from uncertainty, pain, or the need to do work. You will never escape those 3. Most of the issues that we get in is trying to get out of those 3. And then that becomes a game. So that's number one.
Who was that? Who was the quote by?
Phil Stutz.
Stutz. Okay.
Good documentary on him in Netflix called Stutz.
Cool. Okay.
Number 2, then you just put me on the spot here. Number 2 is understand the science of hope. Always think about, where do I want to go? What agency do I have? That's agency. Your job is to build agency, which is your ability to act on your own behalf. So you can find pathways, not one pathway, find pathways. And ultimately, and third is you want to work on building confidence. You got to have agency to have confidence. And if you look at the etymology of confidence, confidence means intense trust. You're going to have agency and have intense trust in yourself that you can navigate this retirement. You don't have agency, you don't have intense trust, you're going to live a smaller life. So that's number 3.
Love it.
Number 4 is focus on your energy, because it's really hard to have any of these things if you're not able to show up. And focusing on that is eating, sleeping, moving, breathing. This should be a game for you. In retirement, you have the most time to do that. And then 5, oh Lord, what's 5? I think you can do this. You can do this. I think everybody can do this. Doesn't mean your life is going to be all rosy. Doesn't mean that it's going to be a retirement that may be very different, substantially less materially than you wanted. Doesn't mean that it won't be that. But if you define what brings joy to your life, money should be a lot less of an issue than it is. It seems to be easy to say, but I've seen plenty of examples to prove it true.
Beautiful. I love all 5 of those. Funny, number 4, focus on your energy. My dad is 75, still living. He likes to go to the golf course in the summer. He lives across the street from it. He has a buddy there. He asked his buddy, man, I'm always tired. I'm just, tired. I want to, kind of take naps. Sorry, Dad, by the way. But he asked his buddy, how do I get more energy? And his buddy said, go drink some beet juice. And I said, Dad, maybe try some of the other things first before going and buying a bunch of beet juice. What did he do? He went and bought some beet juice for some energy. So
we all want the pill.
We all want the pill. We all want the pill. Sorry, Dad. But Roger, this was incredible. Those are 5 great things to leave on. For all of the listeners, I'm going to link all of Roger's information below, so you can go check him out. He's a great follow. If you want to be a part of his club or reach out to him as well, all his information will be below. I imagine he'll take any questions along the way. This will be on all streaming platforms and YouTube here soon. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it.
Oh, buddy.